Reflective video for Project 8, Progressing Theory and Practice. What I wanted to discuss in this reflective video was the whole purpose of Project 8. It was based around showing and demonstrating a lot more sketchbook work, because I do feel that possibly we don't get to see enough sketchbook work with the processes and the ideas for each of the projects, especially in Zoom meetings, where sort of other students and tutors, we all get together and have a discussion. We only kind of ever see samples or working samples that are under progress and so forth. So what I wanted to do was put together and show a little bit more in depth the sketchbook with lots of drawing. And obviously now, because my textile practice is knit based, I wanted to take the new techniques that I'd learnt with my collaboration with Andrew Potter, demonstrate a little bit more in depth with the techniques. I've actually learnt that there's a lot more handwork with transferring stitches and so forth, lots of problem solving, lots of counting. So it's all kind of following a methodical cycle. But what I kind of discovered was, which for me was important to demonstrate, was design, because I am a designer. So to break this down, I then went and decided to not use a colour palette. I went back to monochrome or black and white. And it was interesting because the black and white samples then developed. They stood out a little bit more. Stitches and movement of the stitches together with stripes, tucking, intarsia, eyelets and holes started to push the design ideas a little bit more forward. So in the sketchbook, I'm actually demonstrating the processes of using a drawing, laying out, it could be a stripe, a row of eyelets with tuck and so forth. And as I was knitting these, the process started to develop more design ideas. And I think the conclusion to Project 8 is a lot of the work is three-dimensional. It's tactile. It makes you want to touch the samples, even though they are just smaller. Lot more detail. And think one thing that I did come across, they were taking a lot longer to make, which was a good thing, because it slowed me down, because I do have a tendency to produce too many samples. But I don't think that's a bad thing in my practice. I just need to then start to refine and reflect a little bit more. But on the whole, that is the way that I work, and it's a structure that I enjoy. So this was an ongoing demonstration within the sketchbook, and I'm still kind of making connections with previous research and learning. So I think what I've adapted within my work is the idea of unstructured play, playing with the knitting machine, playing with design, what you can do, because my knowledge of the technical aspect is still quite basic, and my knitting machines, I have 4 in total now, 2 Bond Elites and 2 Bond Classics, which is quite a good thing to have because they do different things. Some of them will only carry certain yarns and so forth. But what I would like to do is, if I'm going to go large scale with knitting pieces of fabric, it will allow me to start a piece, then I can leave it, start on something else, and come back and so forth, and work in that method. So I have tried to push design ideas, because these machines will only do a certain amount of technical stuff. They won't do punch cards or anything like that. But I think what it does do, it's setting a basic foundation for me. But I still think that the design ideas with such basic knowledge and techniques can actually still push the boundaries for design, which I've started to discover. And I think this came from just using black and white, because it still generated shape, it still generated the textures. I still used different types of yarn and so forth, and it still stimulated sort of redevelopments of things like, well, I'll try this and I'll try that, and became a lot more experimental. I think the idea of playing and unstructured play and using the body as a platform is all still there. I've demonstrated this within the sketchbook. I'm liking the idea of the research from Project 7, the dyslexia and the connections with ballet. So I started to do some little drawings of movement and so forth with some fashion illustrations, which worked really well. And this then evolved working with the idea of toiles. So what I did, still keeping and sustaining the idea of black and white, I just photocopied my knitted samples, and then I went large scale. I've been using my mannequin in all of the projects quite a lot, and I started to play with paper toiles, and I started making sleeves. I purchased just a simple black corset, and this has enabled me to pin, extend, make an extension, and overlay and fix and apply and still be creative, as it's all demonstrated within the blog. And I think what it's done, it's made the sketchbook more in depth. It's following a process of this methodical cycle, a starting point with the research, then it has a middle phase of experimentation, and then it kind of concludes, and then it circles back round. So all in all, a lot of the work became very positive. I think there's still a lot to learn, still a lot of areas that I can push. The one thing that I was going to do for Project 8 was I was going to show some of the samples, the larger scale samples from Project 7, and demonstrate ballet with these connections that dyslexia has. And the reason why dyslexia has connections with the ballet is that they mirror each other. The dyslexic candidate or ballet dancer finds it very difficult to understand and learn the complexity of ballet movement. But once the creative aspect and the learning kick in, and the candidate finds their own creative way of moving the body and so forth, this is when it starts to make a connection with this form of movement. So for Project 9, I'm going to demonstrate an experiment with the samples from Project 7, and just accentuate movement and so forth. And I think what this will also engage in with external partners is, and it always has from the start of 3.2 external projects, he's still engaging with audiences and inviting them to either come in and have a look at a show, or actually come in and touch the pieces and play, with the idea of playing with knitting. As in Project 7, I used metal clips and so forth. So we can interchange a lot of the work. I'm thinking of still pushing this forward, because I think it's still a good concept to invite an audience, as not all audiences are confident with being invited into a strange possible exhibition, or getting hands on. So these are the sort of directions that I am wanting to conclude my work with. The scholarly report is going okay. I decided that I have sent out another form of WhatsApp messages actually to the 4 candidates. The 4 candidates are all very different. And what I've asked them to do, because they have been on this journey with me, Andrew, the machine knitter, stroke my collaboration, he's obviously seen my work develop, and I've asked for a critical review with a sketchbook and some samples of my work through obviously his learning. I think he's a little bit unsure what I'm asking for, but I also think he possibly doesn't get the creative element. I informed my tutor that he's kind of doesn't get the idea of that you should be allowed not to cast off and just leave threads, But it is what it is. I think he knows that he's quite traditional. But it'll be interesting to see what his critical feedback is on my work. I spoke to Wendy yesterday, actually. She came in for her hair to be cut, and she's going to write me a statement, which I've received today, and there is an interesting key point in that, which I'm going to disclose that for Project 9. She's a very quiet lady, and again, she didn't know what to expect, what I was asking for with her looking at my creative work. She's very, very academic and highly intelligent, but her statement was really sweet. And it was great, actually, what she wrote. But it's been interesting researching her, because I can relate to the feelings and the emotions of the dyslexia, but also relate to the research that I've done with the online dyslexia store that provides education materials and enables teachers to be able to make their job, support their job role, and so forth. I'm still waiting to hear off Emma, the Central St Martin's student. Be interesting what she thinks about my work. I envy her because she's out in an establishment, so she gets to kind of, talk to other students, and they have meetings and so forth, and bounce ideas back off one another and new techniques. So that's been interesting, an interesting journey with her, and it will be really nice to find and hear about the feedback. I'm quite nervous to see what she thinks, and then I'm waiting to hear off Stevie Cousins, fine artist who's dyslexic. I am actually, for the report, I'm going to do an interview. Because I just love her outlook. She just does not care about academic. It's all about creativity. And some of her work has been fantastic. I follow her and Emma on Instagram, and they're posting work all the time. Beautiful work. But it'll be quite nice just to have a one-to-one chat and interview. So all in all, that is going well. For Project 9, I need to present it. And what I do want to present are some small videos to conclude. So I want to be the case study, talking to the camera, to inform the audience of what I've got from doing case studies on these 4 individual candidates, what I got out of it, how I've been able to relate to them, how I've been able to talk to them. And I think it's been interesting. They actually understand, and they can see that, my way of thinking is different. My work does demonstrate an element of academic thoughts and ideas and processes. And I think all in all, they've all really enjoyed the journey with me. So I think it's been a fantastic experience to do these reports. Just need to get down and get to grips with the presentation of it. Ready for assessment. I'm looking forward to Project 9. I haven't as of yet read through it, but I can see that it's kind of concluding work. And then just to complete Project 8, it's been very difficult finding different types of yarn, so I'm going to go off and make some prototypes with multi-mix media that is wearable, still tactile, still touchable, but I think that this will take me on to the next stage of creating more design ideas and presenting creative yarn and thread for my sample making.